Hi, year one. Hope you had a lovely week. Hope you've been up to some exciting things. Um, Today in RE, we are going to be looking at this question. How do Christians talk to God? Well, it might be a really easy question if the question was, how do Christians talk to each other? Because we just speak, we just use our language, or sometimes we might text or send an email. However, what is it about God that makes it maybe really difficult to speak to God? Let's have a think. Well, if you remember from the first lesson, God for Christians is not human, so that's quite challenging. God is not male or female, so not a boy or a girl, and not a human. And also, God doesn't really exist in the same way that this mug exists. So remember we said about this mug, we have certainty that this mug exists because we can touch it and we can take a photo of it and we can play with it. But God is different. Christians do believe that God exists, but they have faith in God. They can't touch God or take a photo of God or point to God, but they know or they believe that God exists. And so they have a special way of talking to God, and that's called prayer. So let's have a look. When Christians talk to God, it's called prayer. And prayer is different and special for every Christian. Sometimes prayer is silent. Don't say a word. It's just absolute silence. Sometimes prayer is loud. Sometimes prayer is public, in a church or in the street. Even in some schools, there's prayer. And sometimes prayer is private. Sometimes it's in your own house. Sometimes it's just maybe in your car or on the train. So sometimes prayer is silent. Sometimes it's loud. Sometimes it's public. Sometimes it's private. Even though Christians can't see God, they believe God is real because of their faith, and they believe God can communicate with them through prayer. Sometimes, when Christians pray, they put their hands together as a sign that they are praying. And it's not always like that. Sometimes it could be like that. Some people like that. Sometimes people pray with their hands like this, or with their hands outstretched like this. There's no right or wrong way that Christians pray, and there are so many different ways. It changes from person to person, church to church, country to country. But like, if you go and look for the emoji for praying, it's that. That's very traditional. When they're praying, Christians might be asking God for help with something. They might be thanking God for something. They might want to share something with God. Prayer is different for everyone, but all Christians pray in some way. So when Christians sit down to pray, they might follow a set of prayers. So let me just find here. This is a book that I have on my bookshelf called Common Worship, and this is full of prayers that are written down for people to follow. And that could be in public or it could be in private. But it helps Christians. So in the prayers that are in here, you would do asking God for help, you would thank God, you would say sorry to God, you would share something with God, Christians would. Or some Christians prefer not to do it that way. Some Christians prefer just to sort of say what's on their mind, to speak to God as if they were speaking to a friend, to kind of let the prayer go in that way. But it is very different from me talking to you or from you talking to each other, because God, although Christians believe that God can hear them, God doesn't usually reply, at least not straight away. So let's have a look. Some Christians like to pray on their own. This guy here, he might be praying, he might just be sitting there, he's on top of a mountain. Why do you think people would prefer to pray on their own? Have a little bit of a think about that quickly. I will. Well, it's quieter, isn't it? You can have more of a conversation with someone if it's quieter. They might also feel like they might feel embarrassed in front of other people, or they might feel that other people are a distraction towards them. Some Christians prefer to pray with other people. So this is a church. It's a Catholic church. You can see there, you've got lots and lots of people joining together on a Sunday, usually on a Sunday, to go and pray with each other. Why do you think Christians might prefer to do it that way? Well, it could be because they like a sense of community. They like being together. It's kind of like the difference between you sitting at home and learning on your own and you sitting in a classroom and learning with lots of other people who can talk to each other and share ideas and questions. That's quite an interesting way of thinking about it, really. Praying on their own, Christians on their own individually, privately, or praying in a church with lots of other Christians. This is the question, but does God respond to prayers? Christians say yes, God does respond, but not always in a clear way. It's not like he sends you an email back, or he says, I'm saying he, but God. It's not like God says, yes, that's the right thing to do, or no, it's not. Sometimes Christians get help in unexpected ways. Sometimes they believe God sends signs or messages through nature or through other people. It's very interesting to think about the ways in which people expect God to talk back to them. They have to have faith, remember, faith that God exists, belief that God exists, because otherwise there's no point in doing prayer at all, really. So how do Christians talk to God? The answer is through prayer in lots of different ways and looking for lots of different responses. And it's a very special form of communication because it needs faith for it to make sense. So I hope you still got your booklet. I hope you did a lovely picture last week of Peter and Jesus walking on water. This week, it's a bit more of a writing task. And this might be a little bit challenging for you. So you might want to go back in the video and look at where we talked about this. But it says, write down 3 different ways in which Christians pray. And I would like you to have a go at writing a sentence in there. So you could start with a way that Christians pray is, and then describe a way that Christians pray. You might just need to get a little bit of help forming those sentences. But it's better than just writing down kind of 3 words, I think. It's good to have a go at trying to make your own sentences. That's really important. Right, I will see you next week. I hope you have a lovely weekend. And I'm really looking forward to next lesson. We're going to be looking at churches and what happens inside a church. Because we've looked at God and faith. We looked at Jesus. We looked at prayer. So next week is churches. And I'll join you then. Have a lovely weekend. And I'll see you later. Bye, guys.